Alrighty. Welcome to Chat and Learn with Power to Fly. I am your host today, and I am here to champion your next move. I love to celebrate and elevate women of color and allies, and also I say yes to conversations that bring us closer. I am so guided by empathy and unbiased insights, and you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Both are welcome, and I do a lot of these chats, so you'll see me again for sure. And I am so honored to welcome Kim, who is featured guest today, here to talk about negotiate for more because it's time to stop asking for fair pay and equity. So, Kim, I would love to hear from you your introduction. Besides reading from the slide.
Thank you again, Katie, and thank you everybody for joining us. I know it's the middle of the day for us on the East Coast and a little bit, mid-morning if you're out on the Pacific West Coast. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us live. So my name is Kim Tran. I am the founder of Your Work Inspires, and I am also a global tech marketing strategist and consultant by day. So I actually started off my career thinking I wanted to become a lawyer, like very many traditional Asian Americans. I decided very quickly that industry was not for me, but I did start to negotiate, facilitate trainings, facilitate workshops. And so when I transitioned into brand strategy, I went from media litigation and First Amendment law to joining a global media client of ours, aka Discovery Communications, aka the Discovery Channel, better known. And from there, my negotiations path really I accidentally joked that I became a negotiations coach. I began negotiating not just contracts or vendors or even my internal teams or my direct reports, but really for my career. My moral and career compass was I go where I can grow, and that is what negotiations is. It's a growth mindset. It's a collaboration. It's an outcome. It's a very outcome-oriented process. And so that's kind of been my style, and jumped mostly from software, tech to financial services. Most recently, I was working for Capital One and transitioned into the domain name industry where I was managing the .com domain name in Latin America, as well as consulted for .org. And my next play will actually be in EdTech. So working on digital learning and educational technology on behalf of some of the biggest universities and colleges in the world and the country. So I'm excited. And again, thank you so much for being here. My mission really, after being both on the hired as well as hiring table, is to close the wage and wealth gap, especially for women and especially for women of color. There is very, very I want to say black and white data that shows that, it's not just about women and especially people from marginalized communities and women identifying identities. I don't want to leave out anybody, but there are very systemic issues when it comes to pay and pay equity. And it starts with us standing up for ourselves, advocating for ourselves, and working the system, so to speak. So I'm excited to be here again. Thank you, Katie. And thank you, everybody.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so glad you're here to talk about this. And of course, the themes today are really, the rules are not always true and set in stone, and everything is negotiable. We're not here to ask for permission to achieve pay parity, and you will help us map out our values and strength to have more confidence and power in our careers and businesses, and share some mindset techniques and reframing strategies for our fears and emotions so that we can achieve win-win money outcomes for all women and women of color especially. So,
Yes.
okay, great. Let's dive into the questions. Awesome. And let me go over to the tab. And um, this person asks, I don't know where to begin. How can I ask for a promotion? And how do I bring it up even?
Yeah. So this is a very common question that I get both in my work, but also in different workshops that I facilitate is how do I get started? How do I broach the subject? And, there are very nuanced questions. Obviously, not everybody is in the same position or literally position, but also different companies, different industries have various processes. So it's very important that if you want to get a promotion, you understand that internally as an employee, you are now negotiating on performance rather than potential. And what I mean by that is when you negotiate with a different company for a different role, they have no idea who you are. They have no idea, what you're about or what you can deliver. And so, from that perspective, your potential is something that you can leverage and you can negotiate on. However, when you are already an employee, it's very important and the bar is higher now for you to negotiate. And so it's very important for you to be objective when it comes to outlining why you should deserve the promotion. And I want to be very intentional about using the words outline, negotiate, advocate, because as women, and I grew up the only girl in a very patriarchal culture with three other brothers. And the language that was spoken to me was very different from how uh, my brothers were talking about money or being talked to about money. Women traditionally have been, we are conditioned to be grateful for having a job. We're told, oh, just be thankful. For context, I graduated into the last financial recession, and my first job offer was $35,000. I turned it down because not because I was, too good for 35,000. I turned it down because the employer refused to negotiate with me. And that was a red flag to me because if anybody gives you a hard time about standing up for yourself and outlining why you deserve more money, that is a huge red flag. And so you can start from there. So, one very concrete practical step, as I mentioned, is if you want a promotion, you have to understand that now you have to have concrete objective proof. And so it's not about perception or potential anymore. And what I like to call the win folder. Everybody should have a win folder, not just when it comes to to raise time or promotion time, but just day to day in your job. If a client or a manager or even a coworker compliments you or congratulates you on a job well done, or even your manager congratulates you on the way you approached a conversation or something like that, have a win folder and start outlining the top 5 to 10 things or projects or initiatives that were revenue generating or cost savings in nature. And what I mean by that is anytime you help a company make money or save money, that is objective performance that the company, when you go to your manager, when they go to their manager to help you get that promotion, you can relate it back and you can show concrete evidence of why you are able to get that promotion or get the raise. And now it's not about, a subjective performance anymore. You can actually use dollars for dollars and tie it back together. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people do, not just women, but we tend to feel, that we deserve more because we're overworked and we're doing more than our jobs. But I want to remind you that it's not about doing more, it's about doing the right things. And that's revenue generating outcomes, that's revenue generating projects or initiatives or cost savings that you can then relate it back. So that's a really good start from there. But also then as you work through this process, you then get rid of all the crazy emotions that may be holding you back, like fear and anxiety and everything like that. And you can just focus on the facts and the data.
Great. I love it. I love that you kick things off with practical steps that we can take so that we can be prepared all the time at even before we get to the negotiation.
Yes. So, one of the biggest things that hold people back, and especially women of color, because we do not practice negotiations. So, I know it's a little off topic with the question, but I always recommend that, what is the easiest thing you can negotiate this week? Go out there and do it, whether it's calling up your bank and waiving the monthly fee. $12 a month adds up over time. Call your bank and negotiate for them to waive it. Call your credit card companies, call your bills, your Verizon or your phone or your utilities, and see where you can negotiate a smaller fee or leverage. Start to practice it because it gets easier. And a lot of times what holds us back from negotiation is actually not our willingness to do it, but all of these psychological beliefs and limiting beliefs that we tell ourselves, and then we come to the table, scared or unprepared or whatever other emotion that are temporary. So it's very important for you to, for anybody, to root the process in objective data, whether it's someone's compliment to help boost up your confidence, and or actual dollars.
Okay. I want to get to one of the ones that have been upvoted. So let's go to how do you make yourself feel confident before and during a negotiation? And how do you negotiate when you're just trying to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, great question. So I tend to people think I'm an extrovert because I work in marketing and brand strategy and I do a lot of business partnerships and contracts, but I'm actually very introverted. I need my time to think, I need my time to decompress. And I share that because when I first started off my career thinking I wanted to become a lawyer, negotiations to me, I had the feeling that negotiations, you had to be aggressive, you had to be, gung ho and just out there and extroverted. And that's not true. Negotiations is at the core simply a back and forth communications process. And so it's very important to understand what your communication style is so that you can start mapping out what that process looks like and how you can work that process to work for you. So, for example, I get very, very tongue tied if I negotiate in person or in face to face or in a meeting. And so, what I do is actually map out a script of what I want to share or what I want to talk about. I also map out the outcome, the ideal outcome, best, better, and, compromise. And so when you do that preparation work up front, you now have a better understanding of not only yourself, but understanding of what it is that you want to achieve. And so if you veer off that, path or that outcome, you can start to just communicate, just talk and collaborate with the person to bring it back to the path that you want to guide the conversation in. And so going back to the question is how do you, I'm sorry, verbatim, could you repeat it again? I just want to make sure I give credit to the actual words. I don't want to, just like putting words into the question.
Yeah, how do you make yourself feel confident before and during the negotiation?
Yep.
Because you're just trying to get your foot in the door sometimes.
Yep. So again, yes. So going back to that whole mapping out of what you want to achieve, but also understanding where you stand as a communicator, not just negotiator, but communicator? How do you come across to people? How do you communicate what you want? And that starts with mapping that out and preparing yourself so that you can be confident and you have your notes that you can go back to remind yourself throughout the conversation. But also knowing how you communicate best. I love speaking in person. I love meeting in person, but my sweet spot or my secret sauce is actually negotiating via email and writing. Not so much from a negotiation. I want to say like negotiation rule or anything like that. But I recap a lot of the conversations that I have in person in writing so that I can understand myself and the other party and what they want. And so reviewing that in writing helps me stay confident and helps me stay clear about what I want throughout the process. And when you first get your foot in the door, it's kind of like dating, right? You want to know where you're going. You want to understand what it is about the other person, what motivates them, what lights them up, what are their values. But at the same time, if you don't know what you want, then that will provide that has less clarity and less confidence for yourself. And so you always want to make sure, again, know what your communication style is, know what your preferred communication style is, and know what you want, and map that out so that you can stay true to yourself throughout the conversation and throughout the process.
Yeah, we did have a question in regards to key communication etiquettes. So, thinking about the back and forths in the phone conversation and emails. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about that. What if the other side really loves to have phone conversations? How do you track it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, as mentioned, I came from a legal background. And so, regardless of whether or not anybody prefers, a interactive person face to face meeting, it's always important for you to recap that in writing because people can change their minds. There's a question in the chat about moving targets. Things change, right? And so, it's so important for you to document what has been said, what has been negotiated, so that you can go back and make sure that you're on track. But so in terms of communication styles, if a company prefers to, again, negotiate via phone on the phone or negotiate face to face via Zoom, again, mapping out what your key talking points are. So, for example, in my last job, two years ago now, I was at Capital One. I wanted to change industries. I was all set to go to another financial services role where I would be leading a brand new team of products and product strategists and marketers. And out of nowhere, the same recruiter who placed me in that role poached me for another role in the domain name industry. And the recruiter was very phone loving. He loved to call me and he loved to negotiate over the phone. However, that did not work for me because I am a thinker. I'm an introvert. I need time to think through, and silence and actually voicing that on the phone and letting the other person know that you need time to think about the offer. You need time to think about what it is that the offer is about. You need time to digest. You need time to do your research. That is okay for you to voice that. It's okay for you to say, hey, I am so excited and I'm so thankful for this offer. But I need time. I need time to review it. I need time to look at it and see what works for me. Let me get back to you by, I don't know, Tuesday or Thursday. Does that work for you? And then that one establishes your boundaries as a potential employee, but that also signals to the employer that, hey, I have boundaries. I'm not afraid to voice them. And I and that gives you time to digest. It also, in a way, is a tactic to kind of let the other party get a little nervous, right? Are they going to say yes or no? I don't know. But that way, the conversation keeps going, and you're now in control and in a powerful position because now the ball is back in your court, and you've set the boundaries and you've set the parameters of that conversation rather than just going with what the other person wants. Negotiations, again, going back to what I shared earlier, is that if you do not feel confident, map it out, script it out. I will sometimes write up an entire script about what I want to say word for word, and then I also map out what I anticipate the other person will say as well, and I role play it. Again, going back to that idea of practicing negotiations.
Mhm.
So that when it comes time to a big negotiation, whether it's your salary, whether it's a contract, a big vendor contract, you are prepared not only from a mindset or psychological perspective, but you have concrete notes and concrete words that you want to use and practice that you can then um, apply. I don't know who said practice makes perfect, but perfect doesn't exist. So what I
Yep.
love saying instead is practice makes progress.
Mhm.
My first negotiations, I like I said, I tried negotiating my $35,000 job offer. They turned me down. I consider that a successful outcome for me because then I knew that I did not want to work for that employer, even though they didn't, even though I didn't get the job, even though I didn't accept the job, the fact that they didn't want to negotiate with me was something that I realized that that's not a value that I share. And so even when a negotiation process doesn't quote unquote work out, revisit your values roadmap, revisit what it is that you wanted to achieve. And if it didn't work out that way, bless and release.
Hmm. Okay. For an organization who says that they are taking a low spending approach, how can you how can you do a salary negotiation in this case when the budget is tight and um, you're basically kind of told that just be grateful to have a job? Like,
Mm.
what can we do here?
Yes. So I mentioned earlier that I graduated into the last financial recession. It was not a pandemic or anything like that, but it was 2008, and a lot of the big banks were, going through bailouts and things like that, and so budgets were extremely tight. Um, but I negotiated my consequent job offer and got $4,000 more in terms of salary. Uh, and the other piece is, your secret, the secret words that will allow you to step into negotiations from a place of co-creating outcomes and brainstorming and problem solving is what else? What else can we work out together? Okay, so yes, always, always, always negotiate the very most highest salary that you can get. However, there are sign on bonuses. Ask about sign on bonuses. Ask about a bonus structure. Will they, how is your performance going to be measured in that role? Talk about professional development opportunities. In that role at the time, I was able to get overtime. And so we negotiated that overtime rate for myself. And I was at a law firm, so there was a lot of overtime. So even though my base salary at the time was just about 40,000 or something like that, my overtime rate helped me get closer to about $50,000 more at the time. Um, and for me, I also negotiated the ability to expand my role. Okay. So a lot of times when people feel stuck in their job, They want to do a big career change or a big career transition, and they look outside of the company. And oftentimes, you can start to explore and get hands-on experience that will expand your skills as a professional already in your company. And so think about all of these, what else that you can think about. Okay. And we are now in a post COVID world. If working remote is something that is worth it to you, 3 years ago, I actually turned down a job that would pay me $15,000 more because I got another job that was 15 minutes away from my home rather than over an hour. But that for me was worth it. Um, and I only knew that because I did the preparation ahead of time. I also used that to negotiate $27,000 in stocks with the second company to make up for that $15,000 difference. And so if your company is a public company, not everybody of course offers that. So that's why I wanted to, think about it from the guiding light of what else.
Mhm.
Think about the benefits, ask about the benefits, ask for a list of benefits. I have a friend who knew that she was going to go out on maternity leave, and so she negotiated a time back whenever she came back to work part-time, to transition back
Mhm.
part-time. And so think about all these things that matter to you, that you value, and that would be quote unquote worth it to you, not just from a monetary perspective, but also from a values perspective. I like to say that time is not money. Time is time, and your time is so precious. And so when I step into actually my new role that I'll be starting next month, working 100% remotely was something that was worth it to me. And so my time back in my day to wake up, roll out of bed, and just, head into my living room rather than sit in the car and drive to a physical office, that to me was worth it. Um,
Mhm.
because it gave me time back for my family, time back for myself. And so think about all of these what else pieces
Mhm.
when you negotiate so that it feels and it is not just feels good to you, but it is good to you from a compensation or overall negotiations perspective.
Okay, yes. It goes back to one of the themes where everything is negotiable on the table.
Yes.
I want to bring in Sammy's question, which is the timeline for promotion is getting pushed back more and more. And like, what can she do specifically? What questions can she ask to ensure that the offer is fair to her because the timeline has been pushed back?
Yes. Oh, that is such a good question, especially because I like I like to remind people that you are your best investment. Okay, and when we tell ourselves, "Oh, I'll just stay in this job for another month. I'll just stay in this job for another year," it ends up being months and years, right? And 3% annual raises basically cover inflation now. So I want you to think past your current job, past your current company, and think about, if this company keeps changing the timeline, does that timeline work for me? And give yourself a deadline for yourself, regardless of what the company mission or what the company deadlines are. What is in your control? What do you want a year from now, 2 years from now? Do you still want to be at this company? Do you still want to be in this job? Okay, so I want to start from there because, as I mentioned, in my first job, I graduated in 2008. My first year, the company actually had a hiring freeze because of the recession. So nobody got raises. No one got promoted. Some of us got bonuses, discretionary bonuses. However, I wanted to stay at that company for at least 2 years because I knew that I wanted to pivot into brand strategy and marketing eventually. So, what did I do? I used that year of uh, leveraging relationships with other attorneys, with other coworkers. I started to pitch on client events. I started to work on marketing for the firm. And in that second year, I got both a raise and a promotion and increased my salary in 1 year by 25%. Okay. And so when I say that a company keeps changing their deadline or keep moving back the timeline, time is time is another rule, right? Things change all the time. But what is it that you want? And so I want to refer it back to you because in that year that I did not get that raise, I did not get that promotion, I knew by the next year, if the company kept changing, then I would have been out of there. I would have, looked, I would have jumped to another company. I would have, uh, gone into another role. And so while the company is changing deadlines, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of who asked that, but use this time, the next 6 months, the next year, and think about what it is that you want, regardless of what your company does. And use this time wisely to prepare yourself so that 6 months from now, if the company changes their mind again and pushes out the timeline, you are ready. You are ready to jump ship if you need to. You are ready to negotiate another job offer, whether it's internally or externally, regardless of what the company does. And that's how I was able to get a 13% raise and then get a promotion within that 6 months time frame. And then 2 months later, I I jumped over to Discovery because I had spent that year while the company was doing what they needed to do at the company level to leverage those relationships, to work on my next step. So that when the time came, I jumped over to Discovery Communications and went on to get my master's in communications with them, and they reimbursed my tuition. But see how I mean how it did not matter what the company timeline was. I stayed true to what I wanted so that I could work on my own terms and I could jump to wherever because I stayed open to the opportunities, but I also stayed true to myself and what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Sammy, for asking the question. I feel like it's also aligned to Megan's question, which is that she's just wondering about the negotiation process when the company's goals and priorities are moving targets. So I feel like you covered it in the last response.
Yes. So
Yeah.
another more recent pay, because I'm not sure, what levels or what industries people are in, but I see some accounting, I see, different industries here. But when a company changes the way that they measure performance or they measure who they deem valuable enough, right? Again, I am such a huge advocate of having your own values roadmap. I mentioned previously that I was with Capital One and I grew very quickly at Capital One. I started off in events and expanded my scope and expanded my role there, got promoted in 10 months. And when I reached, I think it was 2.5 years, almost 3 years with Capital One, I capped out. I capped out at the company. I also realized based on my values roadmap, and your values can change. Your values can change. And that's why I want you to anytime, a quarterly, half year, however it is, when your values in life and your job change or your life situation changes, maybe you became a mother, maybe, you don't want to work crazy hours anymore. For myself, for example, I doubt that I want to go back into physical office from now on. And working remote is something that I want for myself, regardless of what company or title I work with. And so mapping out that values map and then realizing that I no longer shared the same values as my employer really helped to me then to make that jump. I mentioned that I was all set to go to another financial services institution, but the reason why the recruiter reached out about a role in the domain name industry is because I had shared with her my values. And that was to learn. That was to be in an industry that was constantly changing. That was to be in an industry where I could be curious and collaborate with others and change and be innovative. And that's how I ended up in tech as a non-tech person, rather than stay in financial services. But that would not have happened if I didn't know my values, if I did not know my values and shared those values so other people could see, and could help me reach my goals, and help me map out. I think, again, a limiting belief that we tend to have is this whole idea of security or stability, right? And yes, in general, it's always best to still be employed or have a job before you get another job, right? But I would say normalize leaving jobs if they no longer align to your values. Why? Because it doesn't just cost you money, it costs you your sense of worth, it costs you your sense of self-esteem, your sense of confidence, and staying stuck is a terrible, terrible cycle to be in, because now you're sitting in your emotions, you're sitting in your fears, you're sitting in your anxieties. And so if you have the inkling, the minute you have the inkling that your values are changing, start to do that self work and self discovery for yourself so that you can start sharing that and talking about it so that you can help other people help you, to reach closer to your goals and closer to your work that you want to be doing.
Okay. I want to get to one where it's, when someone kind of accepts the job and didn't negotiate, like, can they backtrack? What do they do now? Is it is it at the next coming up review that they can talk about it, to get to the equity?
Yes, yes. So, of course, caveat, not all companies have the same processes or anything like that. Um, but I want to say that, again, the earlier you talk about your goals and the earlier you engage your manager, your manager's manager in the process of negotiations, the better outcomes you have. So, if you did not negotiate when you first accepted the offer, know better, learn from it, but do not dwell on it. Okay. I see a lot of people who dwell on, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. And that keeps holding them back because now it's all emotional. So, learn from it, know better. And as I know I keep saying it, but map it out what you want to do next, right? And bring it up. I like to say that the first 90 days of any job is so important because you are a brand new person. So if you are still in a learning mode, that 90 days is so critical because people are watching you. You're still the new person, and you're still learning, right? And that first 90 days, from a hiring manager perspective, they want you to be happy. They want you to stick around and they want you to be successful. And so those 90 days are so important. And after the first 30 days or even the first 60 days, reach out to your manager and say, hey, I've been really happy here. I want to explore a little bit now that I've been in the role for 30 days, 60 days, about how I can set myself up for a pay increase or a raise, or can we talk about my pay? Because now that I have a better idea of my scope and my role, it differs a little bit about what we had talked about or agreed upon or negotiated when I first started. And so, in that way, one, it shows that you actually have been in the job and you are acknowledging that you've been in the job. But two, you are also involving them in the process. The worst thing that you can do to any employer or hiring manager is to go into a meeting and say, I want a pay increase. And then you've put them on the defense because they haven't had a heads up. And now it's about you versus me rather than you and me working together. And I want to share this because, wow, 7 years ago, I left Discovery to go to a consulting role in a software company. My first week there, the company got bought out. And in less than 2 months, 3 months, I actually got promoted into a brand new role as team lead. And that's because I talked to my manager about my role. I said, hey, my role has changed a week into my job because the company has been bought out, because our jobs are changing, and I'm doing all of these things that were not agreed upon, that were not within my responsibilities, that were not within my original scope. And so how can we work together to get the title or to get the raise or to get that promotion? And so within that 2 months, I got promoted into a team lead role where I was overseeing 5 people. And I was the only non-senior consultant to have stepped into that role because I talked to my manager a week in, 2 weeks in, a month into my job, because my job had changed so much. And that was the same approach that I did at Capital One. That was a bigger company, very structured. I mentioned I started off in events. Within 6 months, I was overseeing a large scale campaign, and I was constantly talking to my manager every single step of the way and said, hey, I got hired on to do this, but now I'm actually overseeing a brand new, scope. And so how do I stay happy? How do you help me stay happy? How do you help me get compensated for all of these additional things that I'm doing? And that's how I was able to get promoted 10 months into my role within the first year, off cycle, and not waiting until the end of the year to get my raise, to get my promotion, right? So I wanted to just plant those seeds, so to speak, with you. And that way it's not, again, going back to the idea of practicing negotiations. Every time you stand up for yourself, that is negotiating. Every time you put down a boundary with your manager or coworker, that's a negotiation. So I want you to rethink what negotiations is. And it does not have to be, tie and suit and shaking hands and aggressive and, whatever. Negotiations is at the core, again, a communications process. And so just break it down and practice it weekly, daily, and practice makes progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, people have done some research and figured out what number that where they're supposed to be at. At this point, then how, if there are additional experiences, how do you know what value to place on it? And so, really, the question is, what's the best way to find a comparable salary range, especially if it's like a new role or new title that it's not really, the information is not really out there, maybe?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. This is so important because titles vary at different companies, different sizes. A senior manager at one company could actually be a director at another, and vice versa, right? And so I want to go back to, again, whatever role that you apply to, always keep a copy of that job description, because you can then start seeing different scopes or different duties or responsibilities that you can then start researching. LinkedIn is great at this because you can start to look at what people are doing and see different comparable roles or titles. And from there, you can start digging into, what these titles or what these roles get paid across industries, right? And then from there, you can then start digging into a number or salary range, and start to validate where you are on that range. I want to share a story here because, people, and hopefully this empowers folks to stand up and do the research and validate and start talking, right? And of course, there's all these nuances. You want to be very careful at your current company to talk about pay because unfortunately, some companies do not encourage pay transparency. Um, and so one of my clients previously, she is a corporate counsel at a software company. So this means that she's an attorney. She negotiates corporate contracts, and she is an associate counsel, which is in the industry a more junior role. However, her scope and her job responsibilities were that she was advising her CEO, her COO, and even though her title was a junior counsel, the fact that she was advising C-suite leadership, senior leadership and executives at her company placed her at the higher range of her market value because she was doing things that a more senior counsel would be doing and should be compensated accordingly. And so then the entire negotiations process and strategy for her shifted because she came to me and said, I'm underpaid, I'm overworked. And when we looked at her range, she was actually paid market value for her title as an associate counsel, but she was not doing the work of an associate counsel. She was doing the work of a senior counselor. And so that's when we started to then validate that range and start to look at the scope and responsibilities and job duties that she was doing so that she could then negotiate that higher range and that higher salary for herself, as well as the title, to adjust the title to something that would be more comparable and representative of what she was actually doing. And so if you are in an industry where, it's very hard to uh, have a similar title somewhere else, this actually came up recently this week where a woman reached out. She's a brand experience showroom manager. And that's a very niche role, very niche industry, right? But she was able to reach out to her former manager who was in the same role. And asked about what her pay was so that she could then start to negotiate a range and a pay for herself. But she was also able to look at other comparable titles, other comparable roles in other industries to start looking at the range. And she was able to negotiate $11,000 more in her counter. So again, it's a lot of preparation, but the more prepared you are, the more successful you will be in terms of one, formulating your roadmap to that negotiations, but also getting to an outcome that is truer and closer to what you want to achieve.
Alrighty. Okay. I love it. Thanks. I want to get to some, we have so many questions, but some of the mindset pieces, for example, I'm just scared of coming off as greedy and that it is rooted in my Asian cultural identity. So, I don't want to be seen as ungrateful for asking for more. Can you
Mhm.
help us out?
So I get this so much, especially because most of my work centers around women and women of color, especially. I personally come from an immigrant family and Vietnamese refugee family. And so that whole belief of just being grateful for what you're given and not to ask for more or not to, be a troublemaker, right, is so deeply rooted in who I am. But and I also want to validate these emotions that many of us have because research has shown that when women do negotiate, there are a lot of biases and prejudice that still exists towards women. So I completely validate and acknowledge that. However, we need to again rethink and reframe what it is that we want to achieve with negotiations. Yes, it's about more money. Yes, it's about, being paid fairly, but also it's about standing up for not only ourselves but other women. When I finally stood up for myself in one company and I spoke up and advocated for myself and then left the company, what ended up happening was that because other people saw me, because other people saw that I, advocated and negotiated a salary, when people saw that I got promoted within 10 months at that company, they then started to see, wow, that's possible for me. How did you do it? I want to do it too. And so now it's a ripple effect. And so when you think about, oh, I don't want to come across too demanding, I don't want to come across, uh, aggressive, go back to what is actually true. That's a subjective self-talk, right? Who is saying that? You are saying that. Maybe your mom, or maybe the previous conditionings that you have, and start replacing that self-talk with, I am standing up for myself. I am asking this because I am promoting fairness. I am promoting equity, not just for myself, but the woman who comes after me, the person of color who will see me do this and start doing that for themselves. And so replace that self-talk with objective statements. So that you can replace that internally within yourself. And if it helps you, again, script it out, write it out. I I am a huge fan of affirmations. I also studied psychology in undergrad, and so everything starts with your mind and what you're telling yourself. And so if it helps you to write out an affirmation, I am worthy of asking for this raise. I am deserving of asking for this raise rather than I am greedy. Start replacing that self talk so that you can start to be more confident and be more clear of what it is and what it is that motivates you in negotiating for more money.
Mhm. Okay. Now, I want to get to Megan's question of when you have discovered that there is pay inequity, what do you do? And even as if you're in the position of a supervisor, how can you help your team and the people
Yes.
who work for you?
Yes. So I'll start off with, as an employee, when you discover that there is pay inequity, I know that, I don't want to name names, but some companies have punished their employees for discussing pay amongst themselves, right? There's been a lot of media and reports and all of that. And so I do want to caution folks, if you do talk about pay, make sure that you know your company culture, so that you protect yourself first and foremost, right? But also Glassdoor, salary.com. All of this data is out there anonymously. There's also an app called Blink where folks can discuss pay anonymously at their companies as well, so that when you do discover there is a pay inequity, stay objective. I know that there's a lot of emotions. Get all the emotions out. Get angry, get feel bad, whatever it is that you need to feel, and then get objective. Hey, manager, based on recent research, I found that my market value should be, $85,000, and I am currently at 79. Can we work together to close this gap? And that way, it's not an accusation. You're not putting the other person on defense anymore. And I want to say that generally, as a manager, we want to do the right thing. Many companies are working to close pay equities. I know Salesforce is one company that actually just today had a webinar of how they enforce and have regular audits of pay differentials internally so that they can close that gap. Of course, not every company does this. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. As a manager now, if you see that someone is not being paid market value, whether or not you were able to, whether or not they negotiated that when in the beginning before they became an employee. Now, as their manager, encourage folks to negotiate. Encourage folks to work with you as a manager to get them to that pay. I know that one of my indirect reports previously came to me, and even though I wasn't her direct manager at the time, she shared with me her pay. And I said, as a people manager, I know for a fact that you are being underpaid. So now let's partner together. This is where you should be. So let's map out that conversation together. And so it's a very nuanced process. But at the same time, if you discover, whether you're an employee or a hiring manager or people manager, that there is a difference, work together to bring that and bridge that closer to the market value and to the pay equity. I see a question from Khadijah here about providing information about past salaries to potential employers, and I want to remind folks that, again, in some states now, and in some cities or counties, it's actually completely illegal to share past salaries. So do your research. Do your research. I cannot stress that enough. Be prepared, do the research. And if a potential employer asks you about your past salary or your current salary, then you can start to say that one is either outright illegal for you to ask that, or you can redirect the conversation a little better and say, I appreciate you asking that. Why are you asking that? Is that because you have a certain budget range for this role? Is it because, then the conversation becomes less defensive and less abrasive, so to speak. And now it's a collaborative back and forth. But you can also say, I would like to focus on what your budget is for this position and focusing it on this job scope, this job responsibility, because my past salary and my past title was a completely different role. And so I want to focus on what I will be paid in this title that we are talking about. Okay, so these are just a few things to help out.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're at the end of our time, and of course, write to Kim if you have additional questions. She would be happy to answer for you. And I would love to hear any closing remarks and how can people find you and what's the next project you're working on. And congratulations on landing the role that you really wanted.
Yeah. So thank you, Katie, and thank you so much, everybody, for asking and interacting and engaging. I say that I accidentally became a negotiations coach, but looking back, my entire career has been about negotiations. And so I am so passionate about this. And so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Kim Tran. If you just look up Kim Tran, Washington, D.C., I will show up, or Kim Tran Brand Strategy Marketing, I will show up. I am also on Instagram. It's my fun platform. I've been loving IG Reels. I've been loving posting, different content and interacting with folks. So I'm there at Your Work Inspires. And I know, Katie, you provided a few links. But so LinkedIn and Instagram would probably be the best ways to reach me at the moment. And in terms of my next offering, is I do have very limited one-on-one strategy sessions where I work in tandem with clients to craft a personalized roadmap with them in terms of their negotiations strategy and process. And closing thought is that you are always negotiating. It's not when someone gives you an offer. It's not when you get an offer to respond to. The negotiations process, the very minute you talk to the company, because it is a process. You are coming across, you are positioning yourself as the best candidate, as the top candidate so that you can pay top dollars. And that starts with the very first impression. And it's a process. So I want to remind folks of that so that you can step into the process right from the beginning from a place of power rather than a place of reactiveness when someone gives you an offer, right? And so my big next project, and you are the first person and the first people to know about this publicly, is that I am creating an online platform to help folks negotiate and learn about negotiations. I spent the last year conducting private negotiations, salary negotiations workshops for nonprofits, for corporations, and for small groups, group classes. And now I will be formalizing and offering that on a public level. And I will be building out that platform very soon. And so reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on Instagram. I am also on Clubhouse, although I've taken a step back on that just from a personal and professional perspective. But I am also Kim Tran on Clubhouse. But reach out to me so that we can stay in touch and we can keep talking. And there's so many questions around negotiations that we can't address in just 1 hour. But I hope that whatever it is that you took away today, that you take back to your daily life, to your daily work, and start to practice and implement that. Because it is a movement and a mission that I am so passionate about, and that it's so important for me. And yeah, so thank you, Katie, for asking me and for bringing me here and being with everybody today.
Yeah, Kim, I want to say a big thank you to you as well as the audience for sticking around and choosing to be with us. I I would love for you to come back again another time, of course, and all the best. And I will stay in touch with you for sure and come back and watch the video again to study up on everything that you shared. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.